number one with Bloodseeker. So Bloodseeker right now is a hero that I think is insanely good in your average pub. The hero is a lane dominator, it fights in the early game, and it scales well. And in my opinion, that's a really good formula to gaining MMR for a lot of players, even if they don't realize it. Now, why is this the case, right? So you have a good laning stage, you fight well early, and you scale. Well, obviously it sounds good. It's like, oh wait, doesn't that mean you're just good at every point in the game? Yes. Now, of course, you still are, countered by certain heroes in the late game, right? So you don't outscale everyone. Bloodseeker is not the #1 scaling hero in Dota, but with some of the changes, he does scale well. And let's talk about that. So here's what you want to do, okay? At level 1, you can either take Blood Right or Thirst. Now, in this recent patch, they hard buffed Thirst. It gives you a lot of HP when you last it. Gives you a lot of HP. The Q is buffed. The attack speed was buffed. The spell amp is quite high. Goes all the way up to 30. And the big thing is that Blood Right was nerfed. So basically, Valve said this hero shouldn't be an offlaner. It should be a safe laner that has to get CS. And so that's what you play around. So you build the new Orb of Corrosion. Gives you a lot of HP, a lot of chase down potential. Bloodseeker literally has infinite HP in lane, and so you just constantly trade with this item. Then you buy phase boots, maybe a stick, maybe a wand there before, depends on the lane. But then phase boots, after that a Maelstrom. The reason why Maelstrom is good is because obviously because Maelstrom is a damage item. It's purely damage. And in Dota, in order to do maximum damage, you need a damage item and then an attack speed item. On top of that, your Q, your Blood Rage, amps spells as well, and Maelstrom procs are included in that, which is quite nice. After the Maelstrom, you typically want to go for Sanch and Yasha. This is a very popular item in the patch. Now that it gives a 25% status resist, it's really nice. It just feels like the item to go if you want to be tanky, but you don't want to buy BKB in the early game. And I think for Bloodseeker, that makes a lot of sense. You can go phase Maelstrom in the BKB if it's a really, really bad, Bloodseeker game. They just have so much magical damage. But in a lot of games, let's say you know what you're picking it into, or you have a general idea, Sanch and Yasha is the way to go. This is a huge hero that I definitely recommend trying out. Next up is WEX Invoker, and I've been having an absolute blast playing WEX Invoker as of late. This hero is an incredibly solid laner. I think it's a first pickable hero. Yeah, you heard that right. Invoker, first pickable. In the past, it was funny. Anytime I was gaining him more, like playing solo queue, I guess losing him more too. Whenever I would see an early pick Invoker, I would either pick DK and completely out CS him, or I'd pick like Viper, or sometimes Monkey King, and just kill him a million times. Those are my counters to Invoker. And now I feel like WEX is just incredibly versatile. If it's a run-at-you hero, you can easily get them off of you. If it's a chip damage hero like Quap, you just completely out-sustain it. If it's a hero like Storm, you provide good control, and you can actually harass them out of the lane because of your sustain. And now why is this hero good at WEX now? Well, nothing crazy changed. But what I want to say is I'm a big fan of Witchblade on WEX Invoker. This is the item that when you auto-attack someone, you actually get a slow and a damage take over time. Now, yes, that is good with Cold Snap, but that's not really the main reason, and let's talk about it. So, the item build you want to go is Null, into Urn, into Phase. Sometimes you can go Phase before the Urn. I'm personally more of a fan of going Urn before the Phase and just sitting mid, draining the enemy mid's mana, or anyone's mana, anytime they approach. But getting back to the point, you go Phase, then into Witchblade, sometimes a wand, if it's good for the game. But Witchblade gives you attack speed, projectile speed, intelligence, and then obviously the active. And the active really allows you to actually kill people, because WEX Invoker lacks a bit of damage. He needs a damage item. And in the past, it's like, on WEX Invoker, what is my damage item? I guess it's Spirit Vessel, but that item has been nerfed pretty hard, and it's not always that good. Witchblade is that really nice balance item where, I guess you're not really committing to an Orchid. It's a lot more consistent than an Orchid. Sure, it could be purged, but people don't really buy purge items for Witchblade, and so it's pretty consistent how much damage you can do. The slow also allows you to stay on top of people, which basically guarantees a kill if you Cold Snap, Alacrity, and Witchblade. Next up on the list is Troll Aghs. So here's what his axes do. It causes ranged axes to dispel enemies, it reduces the cooldown, and mana cost. That's on the ranged ones, right? The ones you throw to slow people. Then on the melee ones, the one that give mischance, it causes melee axes to dispel Troll Warlord, it reduces the cooldown, and mana cost. Now, why is this insane? Well, it's insane, obviously insane, because it basically makes your whirling axes mischance and 100% uptime, okay? Right, it's 100% uptime. You can dispel yourself, which is a big deal for a hero like Troll, right? This hero is constantly getting kited, especially if you ulti, right? If you ulti, you can't pop Manta, you can't pop BKB, you can't pop whatever you want to pop, but you can pop whirling axes, and you can dispel yourself, which means you're significantly harder to get kited. For instance, let's say you're playing against a Pugna, and you Troll ulti. In the past, I hope you're BKB'd, otherwise your whole ulti is getting kited. Now, you can completely purge it. This is also incredibly good for farming. On top of that, let's say you're playing against a Magnus Ogre team comp, and there's a PA who's mega buffed. You can literally just purge both Empower and Bloodlust with your W on a low cooldown. It's pretty ridiculous. And so yeah, the build here is as follows. So in the laning stage, it's standard troll items. I like Treads, a Wraithband, Wand, maybe Raindrops for a little bit of mana there. Then after that, you go Maelstrom. After that, straight into the Aghs. It's a really nice, magical damage sort of build, but you'll realize that you right-click really hard considering you can actually stay on top of people. Next up on the list is Mid-Shadow Shaman. And Mid-Shadow Shaman is, honestly, it's a hero that I've been experimenting with. I've played 2 games myself, and both games had a very similar outcome, so I'm learning and I'm gonna make a guide on it eventually, probably for the website. But here's what I learned about Mid-Shaman. The hero early on into the game is pretty miserable. If you don't have snakes, you don't do much. Shackles and Hex are awkward to use. Ether Shock is a mediocre nuke. It's too high of a cooldown for it to be as spammable as, for instance, Lena's Dragon Slave for farming. Your hero's attack range is horrible, so it's very hard to fight, right? You have to, like, it's like playing Leshrac, sort of, right? You have to get in people's faces, but you're really squishy. Heroes like that are always really, really hard, right? It's the reason why Leshrac has such a low win rate in most pubs. It's hard. However, this hero's late game is ridiculous. It is so crazy. The shard is nuts. Now, here's why the shard is nuts. You might be saying, oh, Speed, I get it. You just shackle people from further away because it gives you 150 extra cast range and you can kill people with snakes. But actually, what it's really good at is farming. Yeah, you heard that right, farming. Because what you do is you walk up to the wave, you shackle it, it puts down the snakes, you Ether Shock, and that will clear out the wave. So previously, Shaman didn't have a good way to do this. I mean, you could buy Meteor Hammer, I guess. But most of the time, you'd have to Ether Shock the wave, and then with your miserable attack range, walk basically into melee range and try to finish it off. But that's no longer the problem, so you're really good at split pushing. And then, yeah, late game Shaman, he just has really good talents. Cast range, ward HP, shackle duration, whatever you want. You know, ward damage. It just scales really, really well with this build. And here's the build, okay? You want to go Aether basically every game right away. Otherwise, it's so hard to use your spells. So, Aether, right? After that, I recommend you go for the Shard if it's around the 20-minute mark. If it's not, honestly, you have a lot of options. You could go Blink if it's a good, you know, you want that mobility, you want that Kite. You could go Force Staff if you're against a hero like Clock. You could even go Glimmer if the game calls for it. I've seen some people rush aghs, which I think is reasonable. You can even rush Octarine Core now that it builds from Aether Lens. I honestly don't think it's that bad. But yeah, those are your options. And so yeah, the main components are really just Aether Lens and Shards, and then in late game, you definitely want to get like Aghs Refresher, you know, that's kind of the vibe. And last but not least on the list, we have Sand King with Aghs. This is something I played against recently, mid. It's pretty hard to play against. This hero just does a lot of damage. Now that his ultimate can't be cancelled, it's just really obnoxious to play against. I mean that. This hero's ultimate is just so hard to play against. Like in the past, it's like, you know, I'll just hit him with my mini stun and he's completely useless for the next 3 minutes. But now that's not the case, and so all of a sudden this hero went from like kind of an awkward team fighter, like a hero that solely had to initiate because its ultimate was unreliable, to a hero that is, in my opinion, one of the most threatening team fighters of the patch. In fact, I'm surprised this hero hasn't become more popular. It's definitely doing well. It's definitely buffed, right? The win rate is up. But just keep that in mind. Now, why Aghs? Honestly, I actually am, this is a build, and I'll get back to you guys. I'll get back to you. It's one I'm still experimenting with. I just want to put it on the table because I found it interesting. You can play this hero in the off lane or the mid lane. And the reason why the Aghs is kind of cool is it works with the Shard. So basically, if you're gonna Epi, you can Epi, blink in, and then the Shard, it gives you Epicenter pulses based upon how much you move around, right? So let's say you move X amount of units, you get an Epicenter pulse. And so when you Aghs stun, it automatically gives you one at the end of the stun, and then you also Epi on top of that. It's a ridiculous amount of damage. On top of that, it even applies Caustic to all opponents, and Caustic is even better now, because once it's applied, it immediately slows. So not only is your stun a stun, it's also a slow afterwards, so it's one of the most devastating, you know, actual disables in the game when you get to that timing, so it's quite strong as well. I do think there are other builds people can consider, such as like Echo Saber could be alright. I think like Sanjin, like Treads, Wand, Bracer, Sanjin, like that type of build could be okay as well. But yeah, I'm still experimenting. I'll get back to you guys on that. But nonetheless, good luck in your pubs. I wish you the best.